I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I am Amanda Valentine. My guest today, former radio co-host of mine, Jason Allen. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good. I'm excited when I get to talk to old radio friends.
Well, yeah, and just old friends in general. I was thinking about it earlier today before I cruised to the office. That's where I'm recording. I thought it'd be appropriate if I sit on the truthful couch here in my office.
Oh,
That's
the
where the good stuff
truthful
comes
couch.
out. Yeah.
Oh.
So, and it's comfortable and it's quiet. But right before I left the house, I was thinking about you and doing this today, and I thought, man, you know what's really unfortunate is that everyone's so busy, and it's not that we don't want to talk to each other. We just don't very often, just because of circumstances, right? Every once in a while we'll hit each other up, but I'm really excited to be able to talk to you in long form because it's enjoyable.
I know. Well, and you know what's crazy? I was thinking about too, because it feels like we were just doing a morning show together. It feels like it was just a couple years ago. It was almost a freaking decade ago.
Yeah, I think
Isn't that wild?
It'll be 9 years ago at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, we only did mornings together less than a year though, didn't we? Because
but it'll be, I think 2014 was our
Yes.
year, right?
Yes.
That was the year we spent together, which we did a lot in that year.
We did.
Some of which we can talk about, some of which we can't. Well, maybe we can.
Well, we can. Yeah.
But just thinking about how busy life gets and how hard it is to connect with people sometimes. And even to get to this point where we're at today, it took us months. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, but just circumstances.
You got a butt ton of kids and multiple jobs, and you got a lot of stuff going on. And you're super busy. I've been on the path in the past couple of years of unbusying myself. So
I
I'm a lot less
trying.
busy.
I was trying to do that, especially post-COVID. That really taught me a lesson, and then I went and got busier, but it was a different kind of busy, and I prioritized a little bit differently. So that was good. I mean, we can talk about that too. But
yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
But when you have 5 kids and 4 of them are playing sports and you're working multiple jobs, the calendar is an absolute mess. It's actually blurry, and it's not just blurry because I'm 43 now and my eyes are getting worse. It's blurry because it's so full, and it's hard to coordinate all of that. But yeah, it's
when
busy.
I first met you, my very first week on the job, one of your kids was just born during a St. Jude radiothon. Was that was kid number 2, wasn't it, or kid number 3?
That was number 3, and she had a soccer game this morning. She's 10.
Oh my God!
And she's awesome. She's our middle kid, and she's 10 already. So.
Oh my God, I'm so old.
Yeah, so that's when that was. So yeah, it was about 9 years ago that we were doing the morning show together.
Well, and speaking of that, I know I want to talk about sobriety in this podcast and getting healthy and those sorts of things. That one of our very first real encounters together was a St. Jude trip.
Oh yeah.
And so I moved to Oregon in 2013, and I did mornings with someone else for the first year I was there. And then the second year, then we did mornings together. And one of the first things that happened in January was going to Memphis for this St. Jude seminar, because we did St. Jude radiothons to raise money for St. Jude. And we went there and we took a client with us, and any sort of...
We thought we killed him. I mean, let's just be honest. We thought he was dead. I mean, we thought we turned him upside down and that he got lost in the middle of the night and maybe was killed by someone.
That's how drunk we got.
And that's how drunk he got. And I don't know
yeah.
how many times you've told the story, but I know I've told that story more times than I can count. And I still talk to him. He's a great guy.
Oh, do you? How's he doing?
Oh, yeah. He's great. He's in Montana. He's doing very well for himself, as I'm sure you can imagine. But yeah, he's one of those guys that you wouldn't expect to just tie one on like that. And he did. And we didn't see him till 5 o'clock the next night. He wouldn't answer his phone. He wouldn't answer the door of his hotel. I mean, we really thought he was left for dead somewhere.
Yeah, well, because we had to get to Memphis a day early because of fog reasons.
Yeah.
With the airline. So we got there and we're like, what are we going to do? Let's go to the dog track.
The best is, this is how it comes about. We have to tell this part of the story. And I think we've touched about this on maybe on my podcast. that we were like walking down the street and we were looking for something to do, and I think it was you that had your phone out.
Yeah.
And because I'd said something about the riverboat casinos, and his eyes lit up when I said the word casino. And so you just did a quick search, if I remember correctly, and you're like, well, there's a dog track in Racino in Arkansas over the river. And he's like, let's go. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening right now. And then we got a cab and got in a minivan, and next thing we were in Arkansas.
Just
drinking and betting on dogs.
And then we came back to like a dinner where we just kept on drinking, and then we linked up with more radio people who are a pack of drunks,
and then we ended up on Beale Street, and yeah,
we just got obliterated.
Man, I'm so glad I don't live in that world anymore.
Oh my God, me too. Like that, and I hate stuff like that too, because it doesn't take me too much to get drunk, and it doesn't take me too much to get blackout. So it's like I always need to have like a supervisor with me, or somebody to keep tabs on me. And like when we were all that messed up, like I don't know how we all kept each other in line, but somehow me and you got up early the next morning. And
yeah, I mean, numerous trips to Memphis where highly intoxicated and also highly productive, which is kind of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Because we'd be out late getting highly intoxicated and then be highly productive the next day. I can't even imagine how productive we would have been had we not been highly intoxicated the night before.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that was part of life at that time.
Well, I will say too, I know you're still working radio, and it's crazy now. I haven't been in radio for almost 4 years, which is wild for me after spending an entire career moving around the country doing it. But like anytime you get radio people together, it is just like you just get wasted.
It is an industry thing.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And I think that's the hard part, if we're going to get right down to it. I think that there's a lot that comes with that. And I think even with that said, there's probably a lot of us who are in this industry. Everyone's in it for a different reason. I got into radio because, well, it sounded like fun, but also you get to, bring a smile to someone's face and have some fun. Like that's the part I like about it. I also like music. But when people ask me about music, I'm like, I don't really pay much attention to the music. I want to have fun and entertain people, right? And make their day better, hopefully. But also there's some insecurity there too. And I don't know if it like runs deep through radio people. I know for me, I'm definitely one of those people who's insecure. I don't know about you, and how much you want to get into that, but I think there's definitely part of me that's insecure, and that probably affected the drinking. I think I probably drank at times because I was anxious, and I'm not making excuses, but I think that led to part of it. And being insecure in different ways probably led to me to drink more than what I should have.
Yeah.
Definitely not an excuse, but I think that all it's kind of like a perfect storm for me. And maybe it would have happened in any field. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But I think for me, as I look back on it, I think that was probably part of it. There was times where I drank just to relax or just feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know where the off switch was sometimes, and that was a problem.
Yeah, I definitely relate to all of that. And I think it's also hard because drinking is such a cultural thing. It's a social thing. Like even like for me now, I mean, it's not that I am consider myself sober. I don't drink. Like I'm still willing to drink, but like currently as we speak right now, I've been doing a month of Whole30, which has no alcohol. And it's like so hard to be social because everything includes cocktails. And it's
and it feels like you're obligated sometimes, and I don't. That's just something you have to get used to. But it definitely is the thing where it's like, hey, like even at the races, hey, come down to the pits after. I'll get you a beer. I'm like, oh, and then I have to have the conversation. Not have to, but I feel like I have to explain myself.
Yeah, and that to me, I mean, I've never really had to do that. Like that seems like it's exhausting. Like it'd just be easier to be like, yeah, I'll have a drink versus now I have to explain to you why I don't drink and then be afraid of what somebody's judgment is of that. Of like, oh, like I know for me in a food way, not so much of an alcohol way, where if somebody would offer me something and I would be like, no, I'm good, not because I'm like dieting or whatever, like I just don't want it, then be, oh, come on, you look fine. You can, like, it's just like badgering me to eat cake. You know what I mean? So I feel like people do that with booze too.
Yeah, everything. And I'm sure you've seen the memes. I wish I could remember exactly what they say, but it's something like, nobody ever asked people that drink, how come you're drinking? they always want to know how come
You're not.
the person that's not drinking is not like, why do I have to explain myself? Why is no thank you just not okay? And I also at the same time though, and sorry if I bounce all around, but I have a ton of thoughts in my head. But as far as like, where was I going with that? Oh, saying it's not having to explain yourself, but also I don't want to be the guy that's like the Debbie Downer.
Yeah.
And I tell my friends that because it changes your friend group too, right? When you stop drinking. I also don't want to be the guy that they feel like they can't drink around.
Yeah.
I don't care.
That.
I wish I could. I wish I could have a couple. And at times I can, but there's times I can't. And it's those times that are the worst. And, it is what it is.
Well, I have several questions. One, how long have you been sober now?
I guess the good news is I'm not really keeping track, but I can tell you the last time I drank and we can figure it out.
It's been over a year, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's so closer to 2, but
cool.
I know before we started this, I said something about 18 months. That's not accurate though. It's, so December 24th will be 2 years.
Okay.
So we're getting close. Yeah.
So for me, I mean, obviously we only worked together for a year. So like seeing you in person for a year, which, and it's been almost a decade since that happened. I mean, I never would have thought that you had any issues with alcohol. I mean, obviously we just talked about how we went to like industry events and got hammered. And also when we went to
do that.
Yeah, and when we went to music festivals together, we went to Cape Blanco, and of course we got hammered there for like days. And I peed on John Party's bus on his bus tire and almost stole a golf cart and everything else. And like that was
make a note of that. She didn't pee in his bus; she peed on his tire outside the bus. Yeah. That's the best part.
And I saw him in Cincinnati, and I told him that, and he's like, "Okay, like, why are you telling me this?
Why are we talking about this? Because it was awesome."
Side note: I don't know if you remember this or not. Like one of my favorite things about that night was like, so first off, I didn't have like my backstage pass or whatever, and I snuck a listener backstage because I'm like, we wormed our way backstage after the concert. And then we started talking to the Cadillac 3 somehow, and I started making jokes that they were laughing at, and then they were like, hey, do you want to come do a shot with us? And we're like, yeah. And so we just followed with them, and like everyone went on John Party's bus. And then we were on there, my phone died. So I was telling everyone, like, my phone died. Can I use your phone real quick? And I took everyone's phone on the bus and added myself as a Facebook friend.
Yeah. Are you still Facebook friends with most of those people?
I don't even remember who they were, so probably not.
But there was band members, right?
Yeah.
There was girlfriends. Yeah. And wasn't that the same night that I was on Pam Tillis's bus, or was that the night after?
No, that was the same night. Because the next day you're like, let me tell you, I got this crazy story. I ate popcorn on Pam Tillis's bus, and I'm like, I peed on John Party's bus tire.
Yeah, we drank Alaskan Ambers and ate popcorn on Pam Tillis's bus, and you were down the way, and we didn't even know it. We didn't know we both weaseled our way backstage somehow. But yeah, I think mine might been a little more legal than yours. If I remember correctly, I was trying to retrieve an autographed guitar, and we just stood around long enough to get the invite from Aunt Pam. She's like, "What are you guys doing?" And I told her, she's like, "Come on, let's do this." But yeah, that was some good times for sure.
Yeah, well, that was really fun, and that was just one of the nights that we were drunk there. So it's like outside of stuff like that, where I'm like, everybody's getting drunk. These are events where people get drunk. I wouldn't have like identified as you having an issue with alcohol. So I guess tell me your story of like, where things felt not good for you, I guess.
Well, which time? I mean, I had numerous times or occasions where I just couldn't find the off switch, and I think that looking back on it, there's probably more times than I would like to admit. I remember saying at one point, like, oh, it's only like once or twice a year. Right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe once a quarter, I'm good for a good ass out, and that's what I would say. The problem with that is, what is the ass out, and I think that in the moment at the time, I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to really look within myself and really think about what had actually happened. And I think when you get really hammered like that, you wake up, you're anxious anyway. That's just something that happens to people.
That part's awful.
And you're like, oh, that was dumb. Who do I have to explain myself to today? This, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and there was a couple times I stopped drinking. There was one situation that happened where, and I haven't really thought how far I want to get into this, but there was one situation at a concert that I remember like it was yesterday where I fell down and whacked my head pretty hard, and it was just not a good performance. And I stopped drinking after that for a little while, mainly just because I was embarrassed. But it wasn't like
Were you
I
at a
was,
work thing?
We actually took listeners in a limo to a concert, and we went and had dinner, and we all got hammered. Well, not we all, but most of us. And then I decided to try and sneak a dip, and I was swallowing chew spit and got dizzy and fell down and smacked my head on the row in front of me and ended up in the limo and missed the whole concert for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the truthful couch. Might as well just say it.
Yeah.
I've
But I
told
mean, you
people
were working though, so I mean, that was a work event.
well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
technically,
but I
I
mean,
guess it
yeah.
was.
I mean, you
yeah,
wouldn't.
sure.
Yeah, you weren't there
I
with
mean,
buddies.
we paid for our tickets, so we were there as concert goers, but we also did take listeners and
yeah,
listeners.
so
yeah,
you
it
were
was a
the
work event.
listeners. I would say that's a work event.
And then there's a handful of other occasions. Some of them were just, just nights at the house. And that's the thing is not very often though. I try not to. I tried not to ever get like that around the kids, and I think I did a pretty good job. At times though, and I think what I didn't realize until later on was that they did talk to my wife about certain things that I didn't know, like, hey, how come dad's acting this way, whatever. And a lot of times it's just, it's an innocent outing at the coast, and all the guys are out playing horseshoes or playing these games and drinking beers or whatever, and it's not like I was falling down like the concert night, but just enough to where it was probably obvious to them, and I didn't think it was obvious to them. And then there was a handful of other situations, and I don't know that we need to get into all of them, but I mean, the last time I drank, it was at my house.
Just like by yourself.
Yeah. And it wasn't even I say that bad. It wasn't like the other times. It was I mean, it was right before Christmas, and I was doing stuff in the garage that getting ready for Christmas.
Yeah.
And I was just out there just doing my own thing, right? And I would get anxious around that time of year anyway. Sorry.
Good.
Just because of like work, and my work's really busy that time of year, and I try and take care of my customers. So it's like I put a lot of pressure on myself that I probably don't need to. But it can be a stressful time of year, and then Christmas and kids, like all that stuff just amplifies, right? And I don't think I realized it at the time, but oftentimes that time of year would be more difficult than others.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't even notice that at the time until after the fact. I mean, I kind of did, but not to the extent. But it was a situation where I was just out in the garage, right? And just IPA, and then do something, IPA, and then two. And I remember vaguely walking into my bedroom, and my wife said to me, she just said, do you think you're good, or don't you think you're good? And I remember saying, something like, and it probably sounded like this. I was like, I'm fine, and I remember hearing it in my head and telling her that I was fine. And then what did I do? Go right back out in the garage and keep going. And that night wasn't the worst. It wasn't it wasn't the worst performance by any means. It was just the last one. And I knew that I continued to drink. I don't know why it's so hard to talk about. Basically, in a nutshell, I don't remember really what happened after that. But I knew there was evidence the next morning when I got up that I had drank too much the night before.
Yeah.
Because of just it was just obvious that I drank the night before. It just wasn't a good performance, and it wasn't like I did anything really outrageous. But it was obvious, and I knew I didn't remember things, and I had to come to work. It was a weeknight, and which wasn't a normal thing for me. I'm not somebody I wasn't someone who would do that very often. Occasionally, but I wouldn't really drink that much on a weeknight. But I did that time, and I was working by myself that next morning. Ashley wasn't; she was on vacation, and I know when I came to work, I was still on another level, right, and not good. And and I don't even know that I was hungover at that point. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was still dialed from the night before, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart that if that had to be it, and it was weird because the numerous conversations that I had had with my wife about it, and she hated it. Never did it for me. Never. I would stop from time to time, stop for 6 months, stop for 8 months, whatever. And that never did it for me. There was something about that night, and I think I knew. Um, I think I knew that was it, right? Like she didn't have to say anything to me. I knew in my heart that it might be too late.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought maybe it was, because when when I uh, when I drove home that day, I thought that it might be over.
Like with your wife?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. I thought that I just knew that I had told her that she wouldn't have to put up with something like that again, right? Like
Mhm.
me getting to that point, and I had said that to her before, and it still happened. And it wasn't like I said that to her like 5 or 10 times and it kept on happening. It was like
Yeah.
maybe a couple different times spread out over a long period of time, and then she'd just deal with it, right? Or I'd explain myself out of it or whatever. And life would go on, and I would not drink for a while, and then I would, yeah, I can have one or two, and I'll be fine. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this, and I would. I would go on. I'd have a couple, and I'd be fine, right? And I could go months just having a couple and being fine, stopping or whatever, maintaining. And there's just something about me, I just can't. There's times I just can't stop, and it's not with bad intentions. It just happens, and this was one of those times where it's not like I set out with bad intentions. I wasn't setting out to do it. It's just what happens to me. And I just finally realized after all these times that it couldn't happen anymore. And thank God that time wasn't too much, and that she listened to me, because I thought, like I said, I thought for sure that was it. And I was scared to death. And I thought, man, I can't believe I let alcohol do this to me, you
Yeah.
know? But luckily, when I got home, she didn't say a word to me, and I thought, well, this is not good. This is not ideal, But when I finally talked to her, it didn't take long. I just said, I'm not gonna. I basically said, in short, I clearly need to get my life together. Like, those are just the words that came out of my mouth. And I didn't even know that's what was going to come out of my mouth. I just knew that, like, I have to make a change. I don't even know what to say right now. I'm scared. Um, all those things. And she said, "You think?" And I didn't even know what to say, but I just followed it up with, "I am not going to make any promises to you. Zero. Except that I will try, if you're not going anywhere, that I will try and make today better than yesterday, which would be hard not to,
Yeah.
right? Based off the performance. And then make tomorrow better than today, and the next day better than that day, and just keep doing that and see where it goes." And that's all I said. I said, that's all I can do. I know I've made promises before. I'm going to stop. I'm not, whatever. I'm not saying that again, because obviously it didn't work. So I'm going to try a different tactic. And I'm just going to tell you that today's going to be better than yesterday. In my heart, knowing that I was done. And I didn't know how long or whatever. I just knew that it probably should be for a really long time. And so here we are.
So, what did that progress feel like for you? Did you have moments where you're like, I just really want to drink right now, but I'm not going to.
Not really.
Well, that's good.
Not really, surprisingly. A couple of times, but not to the extent of. Hold on a second. I'm gonna grab my shirt because I don't know where a Kleenex is, and I feel like being the emotional creature I am, I feel like I'm something like a cold. Hang on one second. Okay. I just used my shirt that I took off earlier. I'm still wearing one. Don't worry. For those of you who can't see us, nobody else can see us, right? Because it's just audio. So I'm like, I took my shirt off, and we're doing a podcast, and now I'm crying. It's getting really weird. Anyway, so sorry for sniffling, but it'll go away eventually. No, really, it wasn't like that for me, which is interesting because there's days. Many times I'd wait till like Thursday to have beers. You know, I really like beer. Not a hard alcohol guy because I knew it would get me in trouble, which is ironic, knowing that just alcohol would get me in trouble, but hard alcohol would really get me in trouble, which was why I really didn't drink it. But I mean, Thursdays I would plan my route home based off of needing to stop and get beer. You know,
Yeah.
Or Fridays or Saturday, or I need to go here and then I'm going to grab beer while I'm at it. You know, and it's not like every night I was getting hammered, because some nights it'd just be a couple beers just to relax, you know, and that's just what it was. So it really, the first couple months were hard just in the sense that it's just habit, right? Like there's habits, there's friends, and we don't have a lot of friends. We don't really hang out with a lot of people, but the ones I did hang out with, that was the thing. And so getting used to that was a little difficult, but really I knew that I wasn't willing to, if I was going to get one more chance, then I wasn't going to risk losing the kids and her. And so it really wasn't an option, right? Like for me, I just had to tell myself it's not an option. So I'm not really sure how I wiped it out of my head. And which is interesting because today I was at Weimar and I was kind of over where the beer is. And I remember buying beer there numerous times. And I just looked over there and I looked and saw, oh, there's a special on Hop Valley or whatever it was, you know, a beer here in Oregon. Yeah. And I thought, man, I bet that would be tasty right now. And that was like the first time I'd really even thought about it in quite a while, because it's not, I don't have any at my house. I mean, I did, and I just for friends or whatever, but I've pretty much gotten rid of almost everything now. You know, I have a few bottles of wine that I've just hung on to that were gifts from friends, but I don't even think about when we go to dinner or whatever, where before I'd always get a beer at dinner, or not always, but a lot of times I'd get a beer at dinner. I don't really even think about it much anymore. And I don't know. I guess in my mind, I just told myself it wasn't an option. So for some people, it's probably really, really difficult. And everyone has their own way of doing it and handling it and how they cope with it. But I just didn't, I don't know. I just didn't let it be an option.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So I guess.
Well, I know for me, I mean, it's not the same. It's not alcohol, but food is one of my drugs of choice. And so I feel like I've had such a long track record of having a healthier relationship with food and understanding, although, you know, I have a long history with binge eating disorder and stuff like that. I feel like in the moments, especially in the past year, what I'm asking is if like you've ever had these sorts of triggering feelings of like, life is really hard today. I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling really depressed. I want to tap out of this. All I want to do is eat an entire pizza. Like I know it's not good for me in so many ways, mentally and physically. I'm going to feel like trash afterwards. But it's like those are the triggers for me of doing something that I know is not good for me. It's like if I'm having an emotional trigger from the day that is too overwhelming to deal with, I just want to numb it out. And I reach for whatever I got to reach for to make that feeling less sharp, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm really thinking hard about this. There's different ways you can manage that, right?
Yeah.
I think part of what helped me was exercising too, because I hadn't done that for a long time.
Well, you started riding your bike a lot, right?
Yeah, and that's yes, and I did that because my knees were giving me a hard time. Ironically, one of my knees was giving me a hard time because I crashed my electric scooter while drinking. But then they were both giving me a hard time. Doctor suggested riding a bike. I had Baker's cysts, fluid in the knees, and the best way to get it out is constant motion, doing the back and forth, and it's not good to run on them. So bike was the best option. So that's the reason I started riding a bike, and I hadn't exercised in a long time after being really athletic in high school, and then just completely not doing anything for 15 years, married life, all that stuff, right? Not making time to do those things, and then drinking on top of that. So what I ended up, and I'm bouncing all over again, but this will all come back together. But I think the heaviest I weighed was probably like 225 or 230. I'm not even sure. I know that one Thanksgiving I stepped on the scale after eating way too much, and I thought, man, I'm pretty sure I'm the fattest I've ever been right now, and it was like 225, 226.
Oh my God, what a brave soul! Let me get on the scale after I've eaten Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, I mean, maybe I think I also had some drinks too. Maybe that's why I was brave.
I don't think any drunk version of me would ever do that.
But I did, and so that's just the number that stuck in my head. And then, so I got on the bike to help my knees, which it did help tremendously. And then I got kind of addicted to it.
So were you biking outside?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Which was like I started April 1st of 21, I think, was when I started on April Fool's Day. I thought I was going to die. My butt hurt for a week. I thought I'd been violated. I thought, this is a terrible idea. But I just stuck with it. And at first it was just a couple miles a day. And then eventually it got to be where, like last September, when I rode 300 and some miles in a month, which I know for hardcore cyclists, that's nothing because they'll ride 100 miles in a day. But I got to the point where I could ride like 25 miles in a day and it wasn't even an issue. Like, time was my biggest issue.
Didn't you do that for St. Jude thing too? Wasn't that like racking your miles up for that?
Yeah, and I don't know, raised $8,000 or something for St. Jude, which was awesome. And the sad thing is this September I haven't ridden 1 mile, which there's more to that too, but just balance, like juggling the balance of everything. So in the midst of all this process, I started riding a bike, and then stopped drinking, started riding the bike. So then the weight starts falling off, which really wasn't even my intention, even though I would have liked to lose some weight. I wasn't like setting out to lose weight. I was setting out to be able to walk without my knees hurting, which part of that maybe was the weight too. But, because it's not like I'm a tall guy. 5'10", 225 is definitely more than you should weigh at 5'10". But then obviously got into it and really enjoyed it and didn't really ride much in the winters. Got an indoor or a bike to ride at the house in the garage, but there's the time, it's hard in the wintertime to make it happen and with all the kids. So I've tried to ride that occasionally, but this summer sucked for riding my bike. But that's more due to circumstances. So it was interesting because I was listening to, like I was telling you earlier, I was listening to one of your episodes where you did it by yourself and you were talking about like the roller coaster of your process.
Yeah.
And like people talk about, oh, my process, my journey, whatever. Like, I'm not one of those people. Like, it's just life to me. It's not necessarily like a process or a journey. Like, life's a journey, whether you're trying or not trying.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't mean that towards you at all. I'm just talking about people in general.
Yeah, thanks to crap on my life, Jason.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But my wife said to me at one point, like, your journey. I'm like, it's not a journey. Like, life's a journey. I was just trying to do this. It's not like I had like an end game aside from the drinking. I do, not being an idiot. That's my end game.
I would disagree.
Like,
I think that, I agree with you. Life is a journey, and but I think there's also chapters, and it feels like this is a chapter in your journey. So this is a journey and, like, too.
Being okay with I guess this is important. Like, my wife and I had a conversation this summer about a lot of things, but one of the things was I just asked her about how she felt about where I was at in like life and how she felt about, and that at that point it had been 18 months since I stopped drinking, and she said something to the effect of, I think you're great. I think it's been good, but I wish you would have brought me along with you. And when I stopped drinking, she said something to the effect of, like, I want to have a longer conversation about this. And at the time, frankly, I didn't want to talk about it because, I didn't want to know what she wanted to talk about. I didn't know what she's going to drag up that I don't remember.
Yeah.
And also, like, I felt super uncomfortable. Like, let me just tackle one day at a time. And the bad thing was I never circled back around on that to have that conversation with her. So to fast forward to the 18-month kind of point, when I brought that up to her of how's things going, she's like, I'm really disappointed you didn't bring me along with you. And basically what I told her is I didn't leave you out on an island on purpose. I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other, and I didn't know how it was going to go. And I kind of forgot that she said that to me. So I wish I would have like included her more, because here this whole time she's never asked me. She's not asking me about how it's going or anything. She never brought it up hardly at all, really at all. And so I thought, oh, does she not care? Like, you think she would care because it's 18 months and this is a big deal. At least to me, it's a big deal. And I'm sure to her it's a big deal too, because she didn't like me drinking. So to be here and at that point for me to learn that, oh, I left her behind, felt terrible, right? Because it wasn't on purpose. But that also led to more conversations about how that came about, which ultimately led to better things for us, because then we started talking about more things and me explaining like, oh, I was literally just trying to survive one day at a time. I wasn't trying to not tell you or not bring you along with the whole thing. I didn't know how it was going to go. And for me, it was just the next step. So even riding the bike, like I got to a point where I'd be like, I'm leaving. I'm going right now to ride. I don't care what else is going on. And I mean, I would take into consideration the kids' practices and everything else. But if I saw a 45-minute window where I could go ride my bike, I would leave the house and go ride. I was that dead set on riding it every day. Like, I just made that a priority. What I didn't realize is she also would like to have time to exercise.
Yeah.
And she's taking care of all 5 kids, and she doesn't have time. She has less time than I have because she's the one shuttling them to school. She's the one doing the PTS. She's on all these things, helping all the kids out. And I guess what I'm saying with all this is that, like, I was so dead set on accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish that I left her behind in the process, and I didn't even realize it. So I wish I could do that over. But, like, that's where this year has been different. So where I say, like, this September I haven't ridden at all, well, why not? Because we have 4 kids playing sports. We have me working at the Speedway. We make more time for ourselves. We try and go on date nights now where we weren't doing that really as much before. Like, we've made ourselves more of a priority, like, after we've had more of these conversations, right, about learning more about each other. And some of those conversations happen because I'm more clear-minded and level-headed, but also have tried to learn more about understanding where she's coming from. So it's hurt my bike riding, but it's helped in other areas. So just finding that balance. It's not that I'm not going to or don't want to. It's just like finding the balance, and where I'm at now of like, okay, you're in way better shape than you were. You're not going to gain it all back today. You know, you could if you didn't pay attention, but like just making better choices across the board and then managing the whole situation better. You know, obviously still not drinking and just finding time to prioritize certain things, and then your focus shifts a little bit. So as far as like the journey and the process and all that stuff, where it's a roller coaster, like I so compared it to what you were talking about in the one episode I listened to, because you said something like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I haven't had gluten or I haven't eaten these things or that I've gained weight, because I have. And I'm working through this, and this, and it's not to say I'm going to go all the way back this way, but I also don't know that I need and or want to be the person that was so hardcore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like I would say that there's similar situations in the sense that you personally have accomplished a tremendous amount with what you've done, losing weight, and you're a completely different person probably than you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as am I. And you mentioned the chapters, like that was a chapter in my life, and I still want to ride my bike a lot whenever I can, if I can, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, and I'm not going to be an asshole about it if I don't get to.
Yeah.
You know, where I look at it and go, you know what? Even yesterday, I had 45 minutes, but I'm tired. I don't feel good. It's been a tough week, whatever. I'm just going to chill for a little bit. I'm going to let myself chill. We don't chill very often at our house. I'm just going to sit here, relax, close my eyes for a few minutes, and be okay with it.
I think it's all about balance. And like I'm going to say this not in the eloquent way that I've heard it before. And now this is a random poll, but I really like some of the motivational stuff Matthew McConaughey's done. And one of the things he talks about is like these buckets of your life. Like you have a spiritual bucket, you have family. He's like, you have being, a good friend, you have your career, and you have all of these things. And he's like, if you let one thing get too full, the other ones, it makes the balances off.
Yeah,
so
the
it's
other
like,
one's empty.
Yeah, so it's like you have to. So if you're like you were saying, you're riding your bike and you're doing this really good thing, but you're filling that bucket too full. So these other ones are lacking over here with, your communication in your marriage. So it's like that you have to pour from this bucket over into this one now so you can have a more like balanced, healthy life instead of just like, and I think that's the same thing I was saying essentially in that episode that you listened to and that I still also feel. It's like, I feel like almost you have to sometimes live in these different sort of extremes or scenarios or just like, again, you're just living life and feeling it to be like, okay, like Goldilocks it of like, okay, well this worked, but this is too much, or pull this back, or this needs to be pushed forward a little bit more. And you don't know those things until like you live it and you feel it, because how else are you going to know? And like you were saying too, of like somebody can tell you something 100 times. Your wife can tell you, it makes me uncomfortable and I hate when you drink, but it doesn't click with you until like one certain moment because you're living it. It's not that you read it in a book and so like, oh, it's going to change my life now. I feel like that we don't come to these realizations without living life. And that also means it's messy and you screw up and it's painful, but it's necessary to move you in different directions.
Yeah. And the hardest conversations oftentimes yield the best results, I think.
Oh, for sure.
I've had a lot of those this past probably 4 or 5 months, this summer specifically, for a handful of different reasons. Part of it was, the discussion I was talking about earlier that I had with her, and there was way more to that. But those times have led to better times and better discussions, and I hope they only get better. But also being open, like it helps to be open. And when I hear people sometimes say, like, this is this way and it's only this way, and I think, well, that's closed-minded. Like, why would you think that way? Because I thought that way from time to time, and not for any specific topic. I mean, there is specific topics. Like, I mean, you could throw out any topic from politics to religion to drinking to smoking to, I mean, you name it, how you should raise your kids. Everyone has an idea, but if you're really open and you can take something from others, and not that it has to be the right or the wrong way, but just learn from it. And I think for me, that's been the biggest help, is being open to other ideas and other ways to do things, because otherwise, how do you get better, right? If you're just the same way, if you just stick with the same things you learned from your parents and grandparents, then it's all going to be the same. Not good or bad, but just the same. But if you want to improve, you kind of have to be open to learning things, because we don't know it all, right? We have no way of knowing it all, even though oftentimes we'd like to think we do. Being open to other people's ideas and thoughts, and even like putting yourself in those arenas and going, okay, I don't believe in what this person's saying at all, right? I think they're like way out there, but let me just put myself in their shoes for a minute and like try and understand where they're coming from, and then going, okay, well, that's kind of some interesting thoughts. I don't necessarily agree with them, all of them, but I kind of understand where you're coming from. And then like letting your mind, like almost like retraining your brain to like not judge, and then being open to learning so that you can kind of rewire your brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I know people utilize things to stimulate that process. I've heard people talk about, I mean, if we want to get deep in the weeds, people using ayahuasca and other things to unlock their brain.
Yeah.
I've tried to unlock my brain as best as I can, like without that. Not that, well, I don't want to get into that right now. But,
well, here I have a better example for you. One that actually I've been recently trying, of talking about just like different pathways. Like you're doing things just a slightly different way. And I heard this and I've been doing it, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. It's been like 1 week, but I normally brush my teeth with my right hand. I'm right-handed. They're like, brush your teeth with your left hand. But then for this thing was like, tell yourself like, that you love yourself, like over and like, so it's a self-love practice in this way, but it could be anything that you're rewiring your brain, and as you're doing something slightly different than you're used to. But you're kind of giving this message while you're doing it. So while you're creating a new pathway, you're creating it with the messaging that you want to kind of like dig that path in a different way. So I feel like that's similar to what you're saying, of like, how can you just tilt things to the left than normally how you always do them, or instead of always going to the same way to work, like take a different road.
Yeah.
To train your brain in a different way.
Just looking at situations differently. Any situation. Let's use the dishes, for example. So you're unloading the dishwasher, and you and I always do it one way, right? Because I think if you pull the top rack out, there's always water in the cups on the top rack. It dumps on the bottom rack. Then you got to dry the bottom rack out.
Yeah.
You have to dry the dishes on the bottom rack. My wife always pulls the silverware in the bottom rack out, and I'm like, what are you doing? But just for the sake of this conversation, though, instead of like really like, why would you do it that way? Whatever. Be like, hey, like joking about it, which seems silly. I'm like, and I won't even bother like trying to like paint the whole scenario. But the point is like, looking at that situation not so seriously.
Yeah.
You know, like every situation, like I'm one of those people who always tries to say, don't take life too seriously. And guess who takes life too seriously? The guy who says, don't take life too seriously. Sometimes, and a lot of times that would be with the kids and even with them. I'm still learning because it's hard, especially when it's loud and chaotic with all 5 of them. But literally not trying to take life too seriously and know that if you're struggling or having a hard day, they might be too. And one of the big things that I think is like part of the key to having some success in this whole process is like realizing that I don't need to be right.
Yeah.
Like it sounds so silly, but when I realized, and I've told a lot of my guy friends this, the moment I realized that I didn't need to be right, it was a complete game changer. Now that was quite a while ago, and I've learned a lot since then to help make that even better. And by no means do I have all the answers. Do I have a perfect life? That's not what I'm trying to say. But like the moment I realized that being right a lot of times is just an opinion. And if you prove your point and you're right and you hurt someone else's feelings, then what's the point of being right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense.
And I had we had a moment at my house quite a while ago where I was dead set on making a point and being right, and then definitely hurt my wife's feelings in the process. And that was when the light came on, and I went, well, that was dumb, because now she feels bad, hurt her feelings, and I was right, but I just ruined the whole night, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're arguing about something, I hurt her feeling, or we argued about something, I hurt her feelings, whatever, and so that has helped tremendously, and just being open to what other people are saying. I don't know. I feel like I'm not explaining it very
No,
well.
I get it. Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up, but we talked about before we start recording, so you tell me shut this down and you don't want to talk about it. But I love that you brought this up of talking about like learning new things and things in a different way. You were telling me about a podcast you've been listening to that's been teaching you a lot. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not. I can edit this out.
No. Listen, I don't want you to edit anything out.
Okay.
So I'm totally fine with what you just said,
Yeah.
and I'm totally fine. I think
you don't
I'm
have to
fine
go
with
into
saying-
it, but I was just
I mean,
curious.
well, but you want to ask something about it. So do you want to ask specific questions about it, or are you just
No.
you're just asking how it influenced me?
No, I just love the fact that you went to something. I mean, you don't have to talk about the subject matter if you don't, but
No, let's talk about it. Why not?
but the fact that to me you brought up that you're listening to a female-oriented podcast,
2 ladies, yep.
so you can learn about women from women is something men should freaking do.
I mean, let's talk about it, okay? And if the people want to judge me, I don't really care. Like, it's changed my life, honestly. And I've said it's changed my life. A lot of things have changed my life recently, and it's good. It's all good. It's called Sex Talk, and I stumbled across it on accident. And one of the hosts is Tracy Cox. She's British. She's an author. And the other co-host is not coming to mind right this second. I can't think of her name.
She doesn't have as clever a name, I tell you that.
She's really good. But so if you're going to listen to it, and they're never going to hear this because they're not going to listen to this podcast. Watch some wild random ass way they'll end up listening to this.
Oh my God, please.
The host
if anybody knows
please
these
do.
people, tell
Please
them.
do. Okay, yeah, tell them we're talking about them. Because I've actually thought about writing into, because it's some good stuff. But so the first 3 seasons, there's one specific co-host. Then the rest of the time it's different. So season 3, or no, the first 2 seasons. So
Oh my God, I
season
love that
3
you know so much about it.
Well, I've turned a handful of people onto this podcast. So season 3 starts with a different co-host, and that's when it gets really good. Not that it was bad with the other co-host, but she's like, oh, we're not talking about me here. He. I didn't want to get deep in the weeds. The second co-host, she gets deep in the weeds. She'll talk about her own life. Like, let's just be real,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's my
We're
jam.
talking about what it is, no matter what it is, and they talk about everything.
So
if
I'm
you're-
starting at season 3 of Sex Talk then.
Just start at season 3
Okay,
because
cool.
there's some good content, but she's just not as good, and
Okay.
it's just what it is, right?
Okay.
And they talk, a lot of it's about sex. A lot of it is, hence Sex Talk, but a lot of it is understanding females. And I completely stumbled across this podcast by accident. I heard someone talking about something, and I'm like, I wonder. And it was like, oh, there was a guy. It was a guy saying, if I only would have known. And I listened to an episode of Sex Talk, whatever, and I'm like, I got to find this episode. I got to figure out what the key is. And I don't even remember exactly what he was talking about. I don't remember what the subject matter was. Obviously, sex and relationships somehow. But he was like, it was a total game changer. So then I decided to start listening to it. Then I'm 4, 10, 12, 15 episodes deep, however many. I've literally listened to every single episode.
Oh my God,
All
I love
6,
this
7.
so
I
much.
don't know how many seasons there is. 6, 7. I mean,
Oh
I'm
my God,
waiting
I
for a
love
new
it.
episode. They take summers off. I'm waiting for a new episode.
Oh my God.
My wife
You're
thinks
such
I'm
a super
nuts.
fan.
My wife thinks I'm crazy.
I love
She's
this.
like, "What are you listening to? You're a weirdo." And I start asking her all these different questions. Again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds
Yeah.
there, but I asked her a question, and that's when she discovered I listened to the podcast because I had to explain why I would ask this question. And then she's like, "What have you been doing?" I'm like, honestly, it's been so good to really get a better understanding of how females think. And I grew up with sisters. I may have said that earlier, or maybe it was before
To
we
me,
started
you did,
recording.
yeah.
I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But anyway, yeah, I've had women around me my whole life. I mean, I worked with you. I worked with Ashley. I've probably talked to females as much as I talk to males, if not more, just based on the fact that I've worked with females. I
You have
live
a lot
with
of
females.
daughters.
I grew up with females, like all these things. And I've had friends that are girls my whole life,
Yeah.
right? So, but that didn't do it. That didn't get close to what this does. And this whole podcast has really changed my outlook on a lot of different things and tried to help understand ladies better, just how they think, everything you can imagine, why they're tired, why they don't want to do this, how come they want to do this, how do you pay attention to them better, and it's, I mean, like I said, by no means that I'm an expert, but I think everything's changed for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Since listening to it, which is cool because I'm sure there's been people who have listened to you talk about the things that you talk about and it's changed their life for the better. And so, yeah, I mean, in order to have a complete life, you have to like take care of all of these areas, right?
Yeah.
And so part of that is the relationship, part of it's communication, part of it's intimacy, part of it is communication. All those things are connected. And I think for us guys, we don't really think that way. And it doesn't hurt to think that way and dig a little deeper, because when you can figure out how things work a little better, it definitely is a game changer for the better.
Well, it's funny. You may, I just want to say I love so much that you listen to this podcast, and I love that it's like, again, of like just having an understanding of your partner, so you can have these conversations. I don't know. I love everything about it. Like, and I love that it's a podcast. I just love everything about everything you just said so much.
The thing about it that really puts it over the top too. I mean, it's a lot of talk about sex. Okay, it's just reality. That's what they talk about a lot.
Hey man, that's human nature.
Right. That's what we do. I have 5 kids. I didn't get those kids by just staring at someone. Okay, that's the reality. I mean, it was the best 2 minutes of my life. But speaking of 2 minutes, one of the things I learned or have learned from listening to this particular podcast is that a lot of the things that we think that are reality are actually not reality. What I mean by that is there's been numerous situations they've talked about, whether or not it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, me joking about that, that the misconception of how things actually are for females and males, for that matter, are not what you learn growing up and in other avenues. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? So, like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without getting too graphic. I'm trying to think of a better example.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to life than health class.
Okay, so let's talk about intimacy, right?
Yeah.
So everyone has this idea of like, everyone has their own objectives, right? Or goals, or how they want the outcome of intimacy to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I guess what I learned is like there's a huge misconception about what females enjoy or don't enjoy without getting too deep into the weeds. And I think
what your perception, you saying like as a male, what your perception of what the woman you're with is wanting versus what they actually want.
Yes. Or what the reality is. Like for guys, let's just say, like, what's normal? Let's just use that. What's normal? And I'm not saying any particular thing, because you could.
Yeah, I don't even think there is a normal. You know what I mean? Like everybody has.
But we have a perception of, normal is.
I guess your cultural version of quote unquote normal. Is
Exactly.
What you're
and whether that means, performance or anything, what normal is not what we've been led to believe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like,
but I think that to just interject here, but I think that I'm glad what you're learning, and I think what I'm hearing, But it's also, everyone is so individualized. Like, it is like you have this like very broad stroke cultural quote unquote norm that you're talking about, but each individual has their own flavor and flair and what they like and what they don't like. And I'm thinking that no matter who your partner is, that's where the communication comes in, to understand with that other human that you're with in that moment what their needs and wants are. Because what you have watched on Everybody Loves Raymond is not what that individual might necessarily need out of a conversation or out of an intimate moment, or that they saw in a movie or 50 Shades of Grey or something like that. It's like each person, like every individual, every human has different set of needs and wants and communication skills. And I think that breaking it down into like even what these women are talking about in this podcast is probably vastly different than your wife's wants, needs, and communication style. So you're like learning a lot, but it sounds to me like you're learning to open the door to those conversations so you can be a better partner to your wife versus just assuming what you think she wants and needs because she is a female partner to you. Am I making sense now?
For everything. Yeah, you nailed it.
Okay,
See, thank you. And I probably could have been a better job if I would just say, but and then this is a whole nother thing of like deciding what to say and not to say. Like that's a whole nother struggle in itself.
No,
right?
I know, I get it.
And there's a lot of things that we could talk about that I would have no problem talking about, but also like I don't know. I'm totally fine with being open, and I would say even more, but I also don't want to say too much. You know what I mean?
No,
Like especially when it comes to
1000%
personal things.
Yeah,
but I think you did an excellent job, and it's not just understanding what checks the boxes intimately. It's emotionally. It's all those things. Understanding.
Well, and because women,
you're tired, and why are you tired? Because you did 18 loads of laundry. You took 13 trips across town to get kids today. You did this. You did this. You just want to go to bed. I totally get it. Not like, what about me? You know, where previous me probably would have been that guy, you know, and especially drinking would have been that guy and selfish, you know what I mean? And it's just being like more aware so that you understand the situation and handle it accordingly.
Yeah.
You know?
And I want to say too, and I don't want to just say women, put women in a box, because this is absolutely for men too. Like, again, like I think for probably a lot of individuals, all of those things play a role. So like how you make me feel emotionally, how you make me feel intellectually, how you make me feel comfortable or safe, or any of these things play into how you make me feel intimately.
Yes, because
it's not just like this is a transactional thing and it doesn't include all of these other vast colors on my palette of life. Like all of these shades play into these moments that you got on your brain right now.
Right. Well, and the crazy thing is I'm glad I finally figured some of these things. Not that I have them figured out, that I'm learning some of these things is probably a better way to say it. Because I guess I just wish I could go back. And I know you can't, but I just feel like an idiot, really. And I've said that to my wife. I'm like, God, I wish I would have just realized. Like, there was times where, I mean, we're guys, right? Guys want to, I mean, I don't know about the rest of the guys. I'm pretty sure most guys are guys. And they like to be intimate most of the time whenever the opportunity presents itself. And drinking, like, only hurt the situation, right? And then to realize that I was drinking to probably make myself feel better for whatever reason, because I liked it, because I was stressed out, because I wanted to have fun. It could have been any of those things, which ultimately made the situation worse on her, which only made our situation not good or as good as it could be. And then not realizing that, and then it actually had the opposite effect. You know, it made things worse, definitely not better, obviously. And then like learning some of these things now, I'm like, I mean, you only learn when you learn, right?
Yeah, whenever it's right, you're ready. Well, and
so it's better late than never.
Well, what I'm also hearing too, which I think is really great, you know, bringing it back kind of to the alcohol, where you're it sounds like just also the sobriety and everything that you're learning also made you more open to doing things like listening to this podcast, because it sounds like you probably wouldn't have made that choice while you were still drinking.
I mean, I listened to some already, not that one, but and I've always been open. I just think I've really tried to learn in all areas, and not just when it comes to relationships, like even when it comes to politics and how the world's going right now. I'm really trying to understand, like, why are we here? You know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't think you're going to figure that out.
No, but I think like the problem is the only time you can hear real talk these days is on podcasts. I feel like.
Oh, I agree.
Or in certain arenas, because it doesn't get out there, right? And you and I can have this conversation, even if we don't see eye to eye. We could talk about politics, and at the end of the day, we could still be friends, right? Where everywhere else you look, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think just overall, I'm like looking at it, going, okay, like I feel like, some days I feel one way on certain things, some days I feel another way, but I'm just always trying to learn, right? And people look at me and be like, oh, he's just a radio guy, right? He's a radio guy, and he works at the Speedway. He hangs out with the rednecks that drive fast cars.
Yeah. Also, I just want to clarify, not that it would be a problem if you worked at a gas station, but anybody listening in Cincinnati, Speedway is a gas station, but you work you work at a racetrack. Okay. Yeah, I didn't remember if there were them there.
Track,
okay.
Right? The Southern Oregon Speedway. I am the announcer at the dirt track. So there you go. But from the outside, people would probably look and go, oh, yeah, Duck fan, whatever. But really inside, like, I need the shirt that says I'm with the hippies and the cowboys. You know what I mean?
I had a friend who described himself as a hippie warrior. So the same sort of vibe of like, hey, I kind of play all over the place, right? Like,
yeah. Like, I feel like I have, like, part of my heart, there's an inner hippie in there trying to get out. But also, I grew up on a farm, with cows and around mill workers my whole life, and I love them. They're great people. I hate that we can't all just be in the same melting pot these days, or it feels like we can't.
Well, even just to bring up the example of just talking about two different like walks of life like that, where you're at. So I know you're not in Medford, but that's where we work together at the radio station. And I lived in Ashland, Oregon. Talk about just like two towns that are right next to each other that are like this black and white, like we're on this side of the fence on politics. We're on this side of the fence. We're the hippies. We're not. Yeah. And it's like how, like, just like what a microcosm that is of like just even two towns that are next to each other are like on totally different ends of the spectrum, and how it feels like people can't even see eye to eye on that. Like, I didn't live in Medford. I lived in Ashland. And the main reason I moved to Ashland, as honestly at the time, because it's a really walkable. I really wanted to like walk, and I thought it was a really neat, pretty little town. It's nothing that I had anything against Medford. I wouldn't live there. I didn't move there for political reasons. Right. But it's like all of a sudden I had this label on me that I live there.
You're crunchy granola. You live in Ashland.
I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm not a little crunchy granola. I definitely hug trees on a daily basis. But like that at the same time, it's like, well, I don't put myself in a box. Like I feel like I'm kind of all over the place, but like exactly to your point of just kind of like people want to put you in these boxes and put like definitions on you. And it feels like, I feel like in real life, we can have these, most of the times I feel like we can have these conversations and everybody's just kind of like, yeah, man, like we might not agree on things, or I thought you were this way, you're not, or whatever. And I think in most in-person scenarios that I've seen, it's been mostly fine. I feel like it's on social media and TV and everything else that it feels like so combative and lines drawn, and it feels like more like that's the, like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong of like,
well, and I think part of the reason I'm so guarded from time to time in my line of work is you're supposed to stay away from religion and politics for sure, right? We're just here to entertain people and have a good time.
Yeah.
And especially in the climate that we're in now, but also like I work with a lot of our customers. That's my real job, is working with our customers, right? And I don't want to ever have one of my customers feel uncomfortable by something that I've said or done. And so part of me not saying everything I could say is that, like, I don't know. And I also don't like the idea. It's sad that, like, And for whatever reason, I feel like I'm going to be judged. You know, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
I feel like that I will be judged by some people, and I hope that if any of those people listen to this, that they still treat me the same way. Because, and I haven't said a lot. There's a lot more that I could say. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
That there's a lot more to this story that I could say that I'm not saying that helped me tremendously. But I feel like if I say that, I could be judged, which sucks. But I don't think I'm ready to say that yet. You know,
Yeah.
And if people want to judge me, I guess that's up to them to do so. That's fine. They can do that. And if it costs me whatever, I'm okay with that, I guess, you know, but it's sad that we feel like we have to be guarded in a sense, or at least I feel like I have to be guarded because I feel like people could take it a certain way and judge me for that, which ultimately could hurt
Yeah.
the grand scheme of things and you know, business, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
I
I would
get
hope
that.
that wouldn't happen. I think that those people have been around me long enough to know who I am, and hopefully this only gives them a better glimpse, and hopefully they would appreciate that. But it is what it is. So, I mean, that's just the tough part, I think, you know, if we're really just going to be blatantly honest about the situation, because there's a lot that I could say, and you and I have talked about, you know, previously that they helped me tremendously. So I think that's the struggle, you know. But I also, with that said, I would hope that those people would try and take a similar approach of being like open-minded. Kind of like when I talk to my wife, like we don't necessarily see eye to eye on some things, but her trying to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And also me trying to understand where she's coming from and saying, okay, I don't necessarily agree with you. That's not what I would do. But if you can do it and that works for you, then do it for you.
Well, and I think,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
and I think that also comes down to like what I was saying is just like don't put somebody in a box, because it's like you might have assumed everybody that does X is this certain kind of person or does things, and then you find out people in your life are what, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, well, that doesn't mean all of a sudden they're in this group of people. You know what I mean? Of
Yeah.
like they're an individual,
well, there's
they're a
misconceptions,
person.
right, about
Yeah.
certain things, whatever that is. Drinking, whether you want to use drinking as the example or anything else that's out there, and people judge people, you know, and I've been guilty of it myself. And let's talk about weight. I mean, people judge people for
Oh,
weight.
yeah.
People judge for politics, for whatever.
People judge about
and
everything.
everything, and it's unfortunate, right? Because and like I said, I'm guilty of it too, and probably still to this day from time to time. But just trying to understand where they're coming from, and just because it's not okay for you doesn't mean it's not okay for someone else.
Do you know what? I can't even remember where I've heard this from, but like this was really helpful for me. Which I feel like, you know, I'm not going to say I haven't been judgmental or whatever. I mean, I would say definitely in the radio industry, I was more judgmental than I am now. I feel like that just kind of like the attitude is the industry as a whole can be quite negative. But what I've heard before that I thought was really great, and if I have those feelings of being judgmental or being jealous, I heard that you sit with it and be like, what is this? Like basically holding a mirror up to you and like, what is this saying about me? Like, what am I missing? What am I lacking? Like, what is it that makes me want to judge this or dislike it or be jealous of it? Because that's something in me that is triggering that. And like really looking at that of like, if I want to be like, ooh, that's an ugly outfit. Okay, well, what is that saying about me that I you know, like, and then really like take an internal look at that besides just crapping on somebody else and what they're doing. It's obviously coming from something within me, which that's the hard work, and it's gross and ugly to like look at the worst parts of yourself. But like ultimately that is what I think those things are pointing to is I think when people are being really judgmental, it's more of a them problem than a you problem. It's something that they're dealing with.
Yeah. And I mean, when you do what you just said, it helps you get better, right? So if you can analyze what's going on with you, and that's the hardest part, because when you hold up the mirror, it's not always pretty, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's, you know, for me, it was, there's some pretty ugly things to look back on. And so it's being open to, first of all, putting the mirror up, right? That's the hardest part. And then once you do, what do you do with it from there?
Yeah.
You know, because you can go a lot of different directions. And I see people that I know that just don't do it. They never will. And that's their thing. That's fine. But I've even tried to share with some of my friends who they wonder why they get the same results over and over. And I'm like, I was that person, right? Like, but you actually can change. Like, you can change, you can improve, and it's hard and it sucks. It can suck, and then you do it, and then it starts to get a little better and a little better and a little better, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Because usually there's something, right? Like, why am I drinking? Am I trying to avoid something? And everyone drinks for different reasons. Sometimes it's just fun, and some people can handle it, and that's awesome. Like I said, I wish I could, but usually people are trying to bury something, right? Or cover something up, whether it's insecurity or things they've done or the way they feel or whatever
Or
that is.
anxieties, stuff like
what's
that.
that?
Anxieties.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm there too, not terribly, but sometimes for sure. And so the hard part is when you realize what causes that, then you have to address that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the real work starts, because then you've identified it, then you got to go to work on it in whatever form that looks like. And I didn't go to counseling. I probably should have, and maybe at some point I will. I believe in it. Like, I know people it's really worked for. I wasn't at times I was scared to go because I didn't want to hear what I knew I would hear.
Yeah.
And that's when I probably should have went, and I didn't. I ended up doing this on my own, with help from outside sources of like learning and listening to different things,
Yeah.
reading, listening, mainly listening to different podcasts and things, and trying to just get a better understanding of things. But just going to work on it, and that's where it gets tough, and that's where there's no answer, right? There's no golden ticket. Everyone's so different that you just don't know what the answer is and how to work through it. And luckily for me, I was able to be strong enough so far to be able to stay away from drinking, because some people can't do it on their own. It's just not possible. And that's no fault of their own. It's just a reality, and sometimes they need counseling, sometimes they need intervention. And I'm just glad that I didn't. But yeah, it's just going to work on those issues. And that's where you kind of have to open the mind up and really just let it work itself out, because when you're closed off, you can't get better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what for me was like going, okay, I know this is the problem. I don't like the way it looks. I got to work on this. I know it's just going to be one day at a time. But then, like, okay, I don't want to just fix that. I want to like learn. I want to learn and get better. Like, I feel like, shit, look at all the things I was able to accomplish. Look at all the things you've accomplished. Look, all the people we know, look at all they've accomplished while being broken in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so to think that it can get better. That's why this summer I worked my ass off with numerous speedways, work, the kids doing livestock, sports. There's no way I would have made it through this summer drinking. I would have crashed numerous times, because the amount of pressure that was on us this summer to get everything accomplished was incredible. To literally just to check every box. If you were to look at it, and I know people say they're busy, I'd say come follow us around and tell me that you're busy. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant or anything else. Like, literally going, we have minutes, not hours, to get here. We have to do this to get this done. We have to do this to get that done. And some of it was brought on ourselves, right? Most of it was, but there's no way I would have accomplished that. All we accomplished this summer, drinking. There's no way. I probably would have crashed and burned hard and numerous times. And so to look back on that now, and all these doors have opened up for me this summer and this year and the last 2 years. Would they have opened up anyway? I don't know. But I feel like I'm just trying not to overdo it now, because there's so many opportunities and so many things that I'm just like, it's not an accident.
Yeah.
It's not an accident that it's happening now. So,
well, I think too, I think a lesson within that is too, which you can disagree with me if you want, but on a lot of the stuff that I work through, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've worked through, and a lot of it I haven't talked about on this podcast either. Just like what you were saying of like fear of judgment, or I don't want to bring other people into it and talking about things. And there's just a lot of stuff where I'm like, I just have to work through this on my own, and maybe I'll talk about it like after the fact or whatever. But I feel like, a really big lesson that I've learned in the past few years is that you sometimes have to let things go in order to make room for better things. So it's like, you got to let drinking go, or I have to like let this job that is no longer serving me in the right ways go, Otherwise, there's not going to be space and room for the things that are right for me and this version of me right now. But it's so hard to like let stuff go. Like, I don't know. I'm such a hoarder with that and like hold tight that you're just like some things, whether they are drinking and you're just like, oh, this should be a thing I let go of, or a job that's not even like the worst thing ever. You know what I'm saying? Of like,
Yeah.
I think it's that process. And again, everyone's on their own timeline and everybody has what's good for them and what's not. But that's what I've learned is like recognizing what's not serving you in the ways that you need it to anymore. And then actually like letting go of them, which is super scary and hard. And then once you do, on the other side of that, like so much better comes in.
Yeah. Well, we've had conversations too, just recently about, like the Speedway, for example. Do I let it go? Like I stumbled into it by accident. They needed someone to help. I was the only guy they could get a hold of that could show up a couple of years ago. I show up and took right to it naturally. Love it. Absolutely love it. But do I need to do it? Is it taking so much of my time that it's hurting other relationships?
Yeah.
And I'm not really planning to walk away from that. But the podcast is the perfect example. My podcast, it's sat dormant for almost 2 years now, because I knew I had to make some space.
Yeah.
And I decided to cut that and let it go. I don't want to. I want to keep doing it, but I knew I had to do something different, right? And so we try and have those conversations often about, is this something I need to do, want to do, need and want to do? Is it something that brings joy to my life? Does it financially, do we need it? Analyze the whole thing and say, okay, well, are you good with me doing it? Are you okay with me being gone? What does that look like for you? And then also just saying, nope, I can't. I had that happen just 2 weeks ago. I had given someone my schedule, told them I could work. They didn't get back to me, and finally they called me 2 days before the event. We need you this weekend. Can't do it. My wife and I had a date night scheduled.
Nice.
I told you 3 months ago that I had the date open. If you would have told me and I would have put it on my calendar, you would have told me 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have put it on my calendar. I would have been there for you guys to help you out. But I've since then put a date on the calendar, and we don't get very many of those, and we're going for the night, and I'm not doing it. I don't care if it means putting some money in my pocket. And I try and help out whenever I can. I love the people I work for and with, whether it's the Speedway or work or whatever. But sometimes you have to say no, and that's the hardest thing for me to do, is to tell people no, especially when I like doing it. But I'm not willing to compromise. Like I'm not willing to have her take a back seat. And the cool thing is now, because I think we have better conversations. We have more thoughtful conversations about stuff like that. Where I'll say, okay, here's an opportunity. What do you think about this? Do you think that I should do it or not do it? Or, we have a date planned. I'm not willing to cancel it. And she'll say something like, well, we could always go Sunday night. You could take Monday off. We could juggle it, or whatever the situation is. If you really want to do it. And it wouldn't hurt to have a few extra bucks. And then I'll say something like, well, yeah, we could, but then I have to take a day off. And you know what? It's already done. Let's just go. Let's just do our thing. We're not bending, and so it's just having conversations like that, and then be willing to say no when you want to, and even though it gets weird sometimes and I don't want to say no, that just being willing to say no and not overdoing it.
Oh, just like having boundaries. And
yeah,
I know that's been harder for me to establish because I've always been such a people pleaser for a long time, that saying no is healthy. And especially I think with work, especially for me, because I mean, even my work when we worked together, I just had the one job, and it was very different there than whenever I moved to Cincinnati, and it just became all encompassing everything. And it was just burnout, and how that would make me feel like garbage. And then even it was just, you're just constantly working, no matter what, social media, everything else. And being so now in this new phase of life, new industries that I'm working in, I'm I have to have these boundaries drawn up, because I learned from that experience. It burns me out. It ruins relationships. I'm not finding joy in life, and that's the point. I'm here to live,
Yeah, right.
and not just
But then there's
to
the other
work.
part, like opportunity, right? If you don't take the opportunity, someone else will.
But
And what
I
if you
think
don't have-
there's balance though, of like exactly what you were saying though. You choose the right opportunity. Some are no, and some are hell yeses.
Yeah.
Like if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. I
Yeah, and
think.
that's the hard part for me is I feel like, oh, I've worked all my life to have these opportunities, and now I have them. And if I say no, then someone else is gonna, then the opportunity might not be there next time, which actually happened. Like, but that's fine because maybe it wasn't meant to be, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe that wasn't supposed to be a thing. And if I'm working too hard to make it happen, then maybe I shouldn't be doing it anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's just been lots of stuff that, especially in the past several years, I'd say even like 5 years, even the last year of working in the radio industry, that it's like, it has to be no's. Like, and just to tell you like a relatable thing of working in radio, the last year I worked in radio, I stopped doing remotes, which remotes is like whenever you go like stand in a Walmart and play Plinko in the wall, in the,
Right.
the tire discounters or whatever. And you do these remotes because all these remotes, and then it's like, oh, I want the money and I'm doing work and like I get to go meet listeners and like there's parts about it that are great, but there's also parts that's like I have like such little free time that there's, of course, these are scheduled in the middle of the damn day, an hour. So I'm driving for 2 hours. I'm standing
Right.
in a parking lot for 2 hours for, after taxes, very minimal money. And then in some of these cases being treated like crap by clients. And then I'm like, I have just eaten up almost my entire day. I couldn't plan anything for myself in this whole Saturday because I needed to make $100 for this. And I'm like, that's gotta go.
Yeah.
And it was like really hard because especially early in my radio career, it was like, that's how you, like, it was sold to you of like, yeah, your salary is so sad and pathetic. Oh, you'll make it up in remotes. And then you got to like hustle your ass off to do remotes so you can like pay your damn rent. And
Yeah.
so it's so burned into me of like, you have to do this. Like you can't say no to this until like I had one experience at a remote, one of the last ones I did. And I'm like, after that, I'm like, I don't need to do this. Like, this is not, like, I'm no longer like just working or living to work. Like, I need to live my life. Like, I am just unhappy. I'm mad. I'm going to go home and I'm going to complain about this experience. Like, this is not serving me anymore, even though it's serving me in these 3 ways. It's disservicing me in these 7 ways. So it's got to go.
Well, and even just to take the money out of it for a second, there's been events that I've done where I'm not making any money because I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this charity event asked me to be the MC for it, and I know I can really help them out, and it's going to fill my cup up, right? Where you go do something like that, not all the time, of course, because if it's all the time, then it can become not fun in a hurry, but you could do something like that and actually fill your cup up, right?
Yeah.
Every once in a while,
Yeah.
not all the time, but like special things where, it means something to you. And that can be really cool. So that's like the flip side of the coin, but I'm with you 100% because that's where, the whole with the Speedway thing, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm not doing this for the money. I like to help the Speedway and helped out a lot there. And it's really fun for me. And it's not the money. The money, yeah, it's great to have extra money. But if it's a burden, then I don't need to do it.
Well, and I think
when
that's
it
also
becomes a burden, I don't want to do it anymore.
Well, I think that's also, ultimately, like, I think what we're both kind of saying, what this all boils down to is being self-aware and what brings me joy, what feels good to me, why am I doing this, and being like true to yourself, and which also includes the people around you, and making those decisions of like, am I making this out of a healthy decision for me? And how well do I know myself, and like just living life from that space versus like, oh my God, I have to do this, or like scarcity or fear or doubt or anything else. So I don't know. I just feel like that's how it feels for me anyway, is like tuning in of like, what do I actually need, and what's legitimately the best decision for me right now. And I got to go with that, whether on paper it looks stupid or not.
Yeah, and for me, it's easier for me to say, oh, I'm going to say no to this because of making good choices, right? It's easier for me to say than other people who maybe aren't as fortunate. So I don't want to come across of like, oh, I can just turn down work whenever I want to.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying, and I know that's not what you're saying either. But like, it's easier when you've spent a lot of time doing this and you've had success and you've saved and all those things, so you can say that. But I don't think that's really what we're getting at anyway. I just
No.
want to make sure that's clear. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to come across like, oh, I don't need the work. No, I need work.
Yeah,
Trust me, I
same
need to
thing.
keep
Yeah,
working.
no, I got a
I have
mortgage to
5
pay.
kids, right? Things aren't
Yeah.
getting cheaper, right? We know we won't get into that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I know how much groceries are, and I definitely, which is why it doesn't hurt to do all these
Yeah.
things, but yeah, it's easier to say when you've had a lot of success and you've been smart about it, but also have a lot of great supporters at the same time. So there's that too. But yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, like that's what I'm saying of like saying no to certain things opens a door for others. So it's like, yes, it hurts to let go of this money here if I financially need it, but I trust that by taking care of myself, a better opportunity will show up that will fulfill that need for me because I'll be a happier, healthier person and can show up to something even better than if I was burnt out and angry to do this for the money.
But that's hard because you have to have faith, right? And
some
and
level
whatever
of like
that is.
financial stability that you're not like, I
Yeah.
have to have this dollar amount to the T, otherwise I'm screwed, which I have lived that life, and I'm very fortunate right now that I'm not like, I don't have to be that scrappy. Not saying I'm not that far away from it.
right.
But
Not
like,
teetering.
yeah, so again, like everybody's got different circumstances, but also like, yeah, it's at the same time, like, just like don't want to hate life constantly.
Yeah, and what do people say? You talk to people, they'll say, a lot of people will say, well, the happiest I was when I didn't have anything.
Oh, for
And
sure.
so, this is the thing I struggle with because I'm always trying to like go. I was more, not necessarily the money, but like, because I don't want to work forever, and I don't know. I've always been scared of not having enough to provide. So I think that's probably why I go as hard as I go, is because I've always had that fear, even since like a little kid. I'd think, man, what if I can't provide? But reminding myself, because recently we've been like, okay, we've been really budgeting, because things are expensive, but like really trying to like narrow things down. And I get worried a little bit, and I'm like, oh wait, but we've saved, you idiot! Like you've saved for this reason.
Yeah.
Not that we're going broke, but like you've saved, so don't stress about it. You've saved in case something like that happens, and nothing's even happened yet. But you're already thinking like, what if this happens? But like the point you were getting at is like you just have to go with what your gut tells you, and then just have faith in it, and just put. And this is gonna sound, this is where the hippie side comes out, but like channel the positive energy into what you feel good about, and the rest will shake itself out. It always does, right? And you might fall down for a while, but you also learn things in the darkest of times.
For sure.
Oftentimes you learn the most about yourself, so that when it does get good, like you've learned from that experience.
Yeah, and I'll say where I'm at right now in this season of life, or in my little roller coaster journey, is that I've taken massive pay cuts, and especially going down to one income when I was used to not being one income for like 2 decades, and turning down some things because I'm like, I think I got to such a level of burnout that I have to come down to this, like I have to just chill and like rest, not to say like, because I know I'm gonna go hard, but like I feel like I have to come to that, like again, like saying no to things, feeling myself out, getting this level of like chill, like I was saying, like I'm trying to unbusy myself to give myself the space and energy. Not saying I'm going to force myself to like ramp things up again, but I'm getting like excited again for like new chapters, new projects, where before I'm like, I'm so exhausted, like I'm going to do it, but I feel like I have to, rather than like, oh, I'm feeling really passionate about this. My head is here. My head and my heart's here. I have the energy for it. It's like, again, like going in waves of like, yeah, I'm not financially where I would like to be, where I've been before, but I was also mentally very taxed when I had more financial stability.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm trading things and balancing them out. So I'm like, I'm hoping by balancing the mental health, then the financial stability will come in a more balanced way versus burning myself out of just being in a healthier place. And I don't need to be a billionaire, and I also don't want to be like poor. I don't want to like have my electricity shut off on a regular basis. So it's like, but it's how do I find a happy medium after, again, bringing this back to where we've been before of like, I can't be at this level of burnout because everything suffers around me. I have to almost take it at a dip and chill it so much out so I can come back out and level out. And that's where I feel like I'm coming to a space where I feel like I can come get closer to a level out moment. I hope, again, having faith that I'm doing this correctly by trusting my gut feelings and trusting what I've known from, I've learned from my own life, that I can't live burnt out. Like, I'll have money, but it matters.
What's the point if you don't have any time to do anything?
I know.
You can't use it for anything because you're running here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, I'm no longer enjoying my life. And so I'm like, what if I die tomorrow? Like, that is completely plausible. Like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I could have a heart attack. Like, anything could happen. And do I want to go out because I'm so overworked and so stressed out that like my central nervous system just fries out because I had to work so hard to get this extra $100, but I'm mentally suffering in the process. So
mentally, physically. And that reminded me of a couple of things when you said that too, because I was thinking about how I'm always like, oh yeah, YOLO, I used to like, oh yeah, YOLO, I live for today, whatever. But then I always feel like I'm grinding so that I can retire someday, hopefully earlier than most, but also trying to enjoy the moment at the same time. So it's this like inner struggle, but also like back to the whole drinking thing and the physical and the wear and tear of like you're grinding too hard, trying to do too many things and drinking, whatever. What I noticed too, that I was going to mention earlier, completely forgot about, I know we talked about getting on the bike, but like all the issues that went away when I stopped drinking too. Like, like physical things, like stomach being all weird, from drinking. And, so a lot of those things just went like gone, and then you think more clearly and handle some of those situations better. Definitely the managing of all the things and trying to get your head in a better space for sure.
Yeah. Well, I just even know too, like, and I know this about myself, whenever I'm eating foods that are best for me and my body and I'm feeling really good, like I have brain fog is gone, such a clearer head. I will get so much more accomplished than versus feeling like, oh, I'm so stressed out, so I need to like eat to relax or whatever. Like, I don't know.
It gets worse.
Yeah, it makes everything so much worse. Not that I want to equate drinking alcohol to food, but like this is like my relatable part, like how I kind of hear the same sort of things within myself. That you think that you're doing this thing to help you, to calm you, to like de-stress you, when ultimately it just makes everything worse.
Yeah, and it's hard because in the moment I didn't really see that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't see that it made it worse, unfortunately.
I mean, I think that's true of everybody and everything. And I'm sure there's plenty of things that I do right now that I don't realize it's doing the same thing. And 2 years from now, I'll be like, oh God, well, I was doing this and I didn't realize how much that was making me feel like trash. You know what I mean? I think that you have to live it. You have to live. I feel like that. I think that's the moral of the story here too, is just like have to go through like life is feeling everything.
Still learning, right?
Yeah.
You're still learning. You're still trying to figure it out. It's not like we're going to ever have the answer. I don't think it's never going to be perfect. Never is. So just like trying to manage that situation, that time, like if it's food for you in that time, like, okay, well, maybe I tripped and fell this time, but it hasn't been months or it hasn't been years or whatever. And okay, you recognize it and then hopefully improve upon it. And the next time it's not to the extent that it was the last time.
Yeah.
And that you just can continually try and improve it. That's all you can really try and do.
Yeah. And then that you're doing it for you. And like you brought up earlier too, of like, it's like this thing that you have to like make this decision. I think if you're going to make any of these choices, whether or not any sort of changes, ultimately comes up to you and what you want to do. Like speaking of like health and weight loss and something like that, like your doctor could tell you to do that, but for some people that might resonate. For others, that doesn't mean a damn thing. And you're not actually you're like, oh, I should, but you don't. Like ultimately has to be driven by you, and you have to buy in to why you want to do these things for yourself. And nobody's going to make that decision for you but you. And you have to be in the right space at the right time of like, you've lived life to some whatever point to, like you were just saying, like that in December, you're like, this is it. Like, this is enough. Like you had to do it that one time. You know what I mean? Like that was just one more time than the last time you did it to be like, that's enough. And it's just never, I think, sometimes know exactly when that is. And I think that, at least for me, speaking for myself, when you try to make lightning strike and you're trying to find that like pivotal moment or make this the pivotal moment, like it's not going to stick, is in the way of like, again, like you're just listening to yourself and then you're just kind of like, you just never know when that moment is going to be. As an impatient person, again, who like wants to control the situations, is frustrating. But it's like, you just have to live.
When you try and think ahead. So let's say, go back to drinking, and I'm drinking and trying to make that decision, and you think down the road, well, what? Oh, then there's going to be this concert, and so is going to be there, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. When I decided, I didn't think about any of those things. Right?
Yeah.
When I decided, I was like, this is what's happening. The rest is going to figure itself out.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is what's happening. And moving forward, I'll deal with each one of those situations individually, but I can't think about those because I tried to do that before and I couldn't. Then I wouldn't stop, right? Because I'd be like, well, we're gonna be hanging out with so and so, and then I gotta do this, and then I'm be here. You know how many times people have offered me beers in the last 20 months or however long it's been? More than I can even count. But it wasn't the end of the world to say no. But when you think about it before stopping, it seems like there's no way I could do that. There's no way.
Yeah.
And you make all these excuses up in your head and just saying, instead of just saying, no, this is what I'm doing, and don't overthink it. Because it hasn't happened yet. That's one of the hardest things for me to do, is not worry about things that haven't happened yet. And then just deciding that I'm just going to take it one day at a time and deal with it that way. Because if you try and look too far ahead, you'll never do it. You'll never do it because you'll talk yourself out of it. At least for me personally, I would talk myself out of it every time. Maybe I made it 3 months, but I'm like, well, I'll be okay this time.
Well, I think
just have to decide.
I think not only that, but you also are looking ahead at the pain you guess that you're going to feel. And you, like human nature, you want to avoid pain. So you're like, I'm going to have this painful conversation. I'm going to have this painful experience. So you're just like, I don't want to feel going through that. So how about I don't? Instead of actually putting yourself through like some hard, yucky, sticky, that's going to happen, but it's going to happen regardless. Like that is life. Like you're going to have those no matter what the choice is. So you're going to either make the choice you're either going to feel yucky because of this way or yucky because of this way. You know what I mean? So I think that's hard too, is just you are trying to avoid pain. And pain is unavoidable.
Yeah. And it's sure nice to not have so many pain points,
Right?
I mean, to not even worry about some of that stuff anymore, to think that, and again, I don't want to just sit here and beat a dead horse because, there's people out there struggling and they don't know how to deal with it or whatever, but it's so night and day. And I like I said, I just wish I would have figured it out sooner, but as someone who loves drinking beer as much as I do, to not have it and have it be a good thing is incredible. It really is. And all the good things and the no pain and the no headaches and the no feeling like crap and no stomach issues and no upset people because I behaved in an inappropriate way is like so freeing, Yeah. And to know that like I got, what do I have to worry about? There's things to worry about. You want healthy kids, you want a stable job, you want all those things, but all those extra things that were hanging out there that I don't even think about really anymore, because there's nothing to worry about. It's Friday night. Friday night, I put on the Thomas Rhett concert for my wife that he was streaming live last night, and like just put on the TV for her and let her she had no idea. She's like, I didn't know this was coming on. I'm like, you're welcome, Clint. And I'm like, where any other Friday night I'd have been drinking beers, probably watching football, which I like to watch football, but it's just different. I just look at everything differently now. Not everything, but a lot of things,
No, and I think that's awesome. And I'm also just like, I'm so happy and honored that you're like willing to be like so open and vulnerable of sharing your process and everything that you're going through, like on my podcast and also just like publicly, because again, like there is like fear of judgment and things like that. So I'm like, I think that's just so amazing, because I feel like this conversation and you being open and honest about your experience will absolutely like help so many people in so many different ways that you probably can't even predict or understand.
Yeah, I hope so, because I haven't really talked about it much. I think that's probably why. I mean, even like right now, you're just saying that, like, hey, I'm an emotional creature anyway, Virgo. Shout out fellow Virgos. I love my Virgos. Like I literally have a tear running down my face, which is ridiculous because maybe it's not. I don't know, but like it just seemed like the perfect place to do this, you know. And I've talked about it a little bit to people. I've only really touched on it on our show a couple times briefly, and not expanded on it really at all. Um, and it just kind of little tidbits here. They're like, yeah, I haven't drank, whatever, you know, nothing like except the, you know, I think I had one post maybe at the year mark somewhere around there, and it was really just to hold myself accountable. And I had seen someone else do that, and I thought, holy crap, that guy stopped drinking. I had no idea, and he was 2 years in, and he was one of the ones I thought about him when I stopped. Um, and then I told him. And then I saw him in person and told him, and he had no idea. And I had seen a performance from him that wasn't awesome. And so to know that he stopped, and then to think about him, and then I stopped, I thought, okay, I'll put it out there at the year mark because I want to hold myself to it, and I want someone else to, if someone else sees it and it helps them. And so when you asked me, it was like, okay, it's been a while now. I feel pretty good about where I'm at, and I'm definitely comfortable around you for sure. And so this is a good place to talk about it. And I actually think it was good. It took us a while to connect because there's a lot of things that happened since then that made things only better. A lot of things that we talked about, especially with my wife, that have happened since you and I even discussed doing that. So it probably wasn't meant to be at the time, and then
Yeah.
it happened when it was supposed to happen. I believe in that kind of stuff, but like that's really why I wanted to do it with you because, and I kept telling you, sorry, I got to delay again.
Yeah, and
'cause
I'm like,
this," and it was
no
always
worries,
something.
dude.
Something,
like it's
whatever. I'm
fine.
like, no, I really want to do it, but I just, you know, and then the whole time of going like, oh man, I don't know what should I not say, what should I say, but I just hope that I really do. I hope that someone else, and I'm not trying to talk anyone out of doing things they love to do. I simply want people to know that it is possible,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I wanted to share because I want people to understand that it is possible to do. And I'd like to think I have pretty good willpower, except for turning that switch off when I'm drinking.
Yeah.
Aside from that, like when I decide I'm going to do something, I'm pretty good about doing it. That was one of those things I couldn't control. And even though I told myself and I told my wife numerous times, I can do this. I can have 2 or 3 and stop. And like I said earlier, I would. 9 out of 10 times, it was that 10th time that would get me. And that would be the worst time. And so, for people out there who just don't think it's possible, it's never too late. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I drank for 20 because I drank some before I turned 21. Obviously, shame on us for doing that. But what 20 plus year or 20 years, I guess, let's say. And the crazy thing is, my dad stopped when I was pretty little, and I should have learned, right?
Well,
Like-
again, like you can't learn it without living it, I feel.
Because he I don't think he was in the same situation. I would say kind of similar. But there's a lot of people in my family who have the same problem. Worse, actually. And I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus, but and to each their own. And I'm definitely not pointing fingers, but there's probably some things that could be a lot better in their lives too, but they don't know how to deal with it. And that's sad to me. You know,
Yeah.
but
Again, like everybody's
you have to
doing
decide,
their own
right?
thing.
You have to decide how you want things to go, and that people are, you know, they feel like that's where they want to live, and that's totally fine. Like I said, I'm not here to judge anyone or anything
Yeah.
like that. I think it's important that people know it's possible. And you know, Walker Hayes is another one that I saw do it, and yeah, to see his story, and I saw it, and then then I hit rock, then I fell one more time after I was not drinking when I saw him perform with his whole family right in front of me, like at a private thing in Nashville, and that's what talked me into having kid number 5. I'm like, if he can do it, then I can do it. And then I wasn't drinking at the time, and I felt so good at that time, and then I failed again, and then that was it, you know, that last time. But so
yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of got rambly there, but
No, you're fine.
yeah.
No, yeah, I just I appreciate you sharing it so much. And like you're saying, and I think there's so many negative things about social media, but there's so many positive things too, of like somebody posting about that like really was a positive, you know, influence for you. And I think that's so true of anything, and it's just being like everybody is, again, like living their own journey, living their own life. And I think sharing that makes people feel not alone. And, you know, maybe somebody heard your entire conversation and they're not even relating it to drinking, but to something else they have going on in their life that they feel is not serving them in the correct way. So it's just like, I think that, you know, we're social creatures and we need to connect and we need to storytell and we need to have community. And what that is sharing our lives with each other, and it can make a huge difference. And, you know, I think it's hard to sometimes, like when you have like an avenue like this, like us, like radio, podcasting, like we can't see who's listening. I don't know who's listening to this. I have no idea unless they say something to me, and you just like never know what that impact is. But it's like, I know for the podcasts I've listened to or the social media posts I've seen, like some of those things have had like such great impact on me. And, like how, of just like learning about other people and what they do, and of just being like open and honest about being human, and being human is living all of the things, good and bad.
Well, and we all have our faults, right? Like I had a friend of mine tell me recently, he's like, oh man, I thought you guys were like I thought you had like the perfect family, the perfect everything. I'm like, buddy, nobody does.
Right, that does not exist.
And if they tell you that, they're lying. Everyone has their issues, even if they're small issues, you know? And that's the thing, is just realizing that we're all human.
Yeah.
We're all human. We all make mistakes, but the good thing is we can hopefully learn from it and then get better. And like I said, by no means do I have all the answers, and I still have a lot to learn. And I've made some terrible mistakes too, you know? So it's not like, you know, as I sit here and say like, oh yeah, I was able to do it on my own, I also know that I've also done a lot of terrible things on my own too, you know. So it's just learning from those and trying to get better, you know. And you can't erase them, but you learn from it. You repair as best you can and then move on from there, you know. And
but I think also learning from those things is a choice. Like, you know, you're choosing to see these things that you don't like, that again, like that is something that you perceive as something that you don't like that you've done, but you're choosing to get a lesson out of it. And I think that's an awesome choice, and not everybody makes that choice, and that's on them. And again, everybody's living their own life, but I feel like that's where it's helpful, is like you have to have those yuck moments, because that's where the growth comes in, like we mentioned earlier, and where you're going to learn a lesson. It's the choice to like look at it and grow and learn a lesson versus just repeating it over and over again if it hurts you and the people around you.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
But again, like I'm so happy that you like shared it. This might be I think this might be the longest podcast I've ever done.
Well, and I even tried to tell my wife, she's like, you're going to be gone for 3 hours. I go, no, I'm not going to be gone for 3 hours.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, you are. She goes, I remember your podcast. You said, oh, it's going to be an hour. Then 2.5 hours, you have an hour and 45, 2 hour episode. And then you talk to him for another half an hour. And I kept just now I was glancing down. I'm like, oh, there's no way I'll be back by the time the Duck game kicks off at 3:30. It's 3:29 right now. So, which is fine, because, and again, this is learning, where before I'd be like, I got to watch the Duck game. Like, no, this is more important to me. Like, I'll get there. The game will be there. They're probably going to be at Stanford anyway. But again, that's one little thing. I know it might seem little to anyone listening to this, but like, I used to not miss a game, any minute of any game. And now I'm like, yeah, whatever. I got a soccer game. I'll watch it on my phone. I'll listen to it, whatever.
Yeah.
No big deal. So yeah, it's funny that here we are, and I feel like there's so many other things that we didn't even touch on, but it's all good.
There's other opportunities.
Yeah. Well, there was like a handful of things too, like, well, and I wanted to tell you before we wrap it up, because I'm sure we will hear shortly or soon, but like you said, you never know when someone's going to impact you, and I would say that like watching what you've done, watching what Ashley's done with herself.
Yeah, also, just clarity for people listening, Ashley is your current radio co-host.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
So I've worked with both of you and watched both of you lose a tremendous amount of weight, and you know, get healthy, and both get divorced, and you know, and I don't say that in a negative way, but I'm just saying, like,
Ashley's awesome. Like, I am so like, it's so funny that like I left that job so Ashley could come in. I'm like, but I'm like, I wouldn't. Obviously, you know Ashley like a billion times better than me. I've only met Ashley once in person, and every once in a while we'll chat like on Instagram. But I was like, and she's been on the podcast before,
right?
But I was like, oh my God, this is like, I know that's. I mean, I don't know fully what your relationship looks like, but it looks like you guys are great co-hosts. It looks like you have a really good friendship and rapport from my perspective. But I'm like, I'm excited. Like, I wouldn't have ever known this person or be able to watch her journey through social media without me leaving that job. So again, like talking
Right.
about like things have to happen and go to a certain order of like, I'm glad just on the very outskirts of her life that I've been able to witness some of the stuff that she's been through, because she's a badass, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to watch what you guys have been able to do, it's impressive. And so, I mean, there's definitely a little part of me in the back of my head that's like, well, they did it. Like, even just getting on the bike or, stopping drinking, of like, you talk about eating and the struggle with food. So, just picking up little things from people who have been able to do it, and anything is possible. It just takes time. And I think that, for me, it's the baby steps. It's not trying to do it all at once, because I didn't even realize I lost that much weight until somebody asked me if I had cancer. And I'm like,
Oh my
why?
God.
Why? And then they're like, you have to be down 30 pounds. I'm like, there's no way. Anyway, point is, I didn't even realize that was happening, which maybe dumb on me, but I wasn't doing it to lose weight, but just literally just being consistent with what I was doing, just riding my bike. And I stopped drinking. I tell everyone I eat less just because I know I ate way too much, just portion control. Still eat pizza. Just had pizza today. But like
Dipped in ranch?
Oh, totally. And marinara. We went top notch. We got Little Caesars yesterday. So we
hot
had
and
the
ready.
good stuff. We had the good stuff. No, we didn't. We didn't have the good stuff at all. But it was hot and ready, and it was Little Caesars. Anyway, just like one step at a time. And I mean, you literally can move mountains just one step at a time. And that's, I think, for anyone out there who's like, man, I can't lose weight. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's just one step at a time. Don't beat yourself up over failing either. If you miss something, you miss a day, you miss 10 days, well, so
Yeah.
get right back to it.
Doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said in your episode, there's a season, and maybe right now, you're not meant to be throwing weights around right now. Maybe there's something else, and maybe you get back to that, maybe you don't, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
again, it's just tuning into yourself and what's best for you.
Yeah.
And it's wild that sometimes it's a lot harder than you think it is to just like listen to yourself and cut out all the noise and like what's actually, who are the people good for you? Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are the things for you that are good for your mental health, for your physical health? I mean, it's a lot. Like on top of like trying to pay your bills and like live a life.
Yeah.
You're just like out here scrapping to live, and then you're trying to like take care of yourself in the meantime. Like it's exhausting, but at the same time, like you can't function in these other areas if you're not good mentally and physically.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, when you start to take care of some of those things, the rest of it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
It just ends up working out. I know it's easier said than done, but yeah, there's something about it, and I don't know. There's something about putting in the work and being positive, and then things happen. And I know they don't always happen, and bad things happen to good people. But yeah, if you put in the work, oftentimes the results will follow no matter what it is you're doing.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. You just have to have some patience, which I'm getting better at.
Yeah, that's the hard part, because I want it to happen now too, but just chip away, and pretty soon you look around and go, oh, wow, here we are. It's been 2 years already, I guess. And, time flies, they say. So.
Well, it's wild. Like even before we started recording, I busted out some old notebooks because I go in through, I'm going to talk about having seasons. I go through ebbs and flows of journaling, which is really, really good for me. And then I fall out of it because then I'm like, why do I not do this when I know it's so good for me? Story of everybody's life, right? And so I was reading some journal entries, some from a year ago, some from 2 years ago. And I'm like, dude, these things that I wrote for like goals for myself, like I'm doing them. Like this is my life. I'm like, yeah, it took me 2 years, but 2 years later, and it's like, how did I not even realize that until I could see it written on paper of like, I wanted this for myself. And I'm like, but I'm here now. But like during the whole process of all of these things, you're just kind of like, oh my God, this is like forever and this sucks. And until you, like, I think you can have that like moment of clarity to be like, wow, look how far I've come, but you don't notice it while you're making the little steps every day. Like you were saying, like with your weight loss. So it's like, but sometimes you need to like stop and look around and be like, whoa, like how did I get here? Like I was just taking it one step at a time, grinding through it. And but yet I'm here and I made it, even though during a lot of that process, it didn't feel like I was on my way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right, dude. Well, I think I got to end it here at 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to talk your ear off any more than I already have.
But thank you so much for joining me. Did you have any like social media or anything you want to pep out? We're just going to leave it at this conversation.
I mean, I'm terrible at social media.
So I just thought I would ask.
Let me just say this. When you said in that episode that I listened to that you're tired of, you're like, I miss Instagram when it was spaghetti pictures or whatever, food, lasagna, whatever you said, that you're just trying to live in the moment. That's me. And I could probably be way better at it. And obviously we have a decent following on Facebook, but facebook.com/mornings with Jason and Ashley. I slid that in there. I did that just for you.
Thanks.
But it's just tiring, and I
No,
kind
it
of
is.
live.
It's a
and
job.
Occasionally, I'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to put some Insta stories from the Speedway," and people are like, "Cool." They see it, and I'm like, "This is exhausting. I don't know how people do it." So I don't really care.
I feel that.
if
I'm
people
glad
really
that
wanna find me,
this one episode of my podcast was so impactful for you. You had like so many like random polls from it.
yeah, no, there was a lot of good stuff, and I don't even think I quite made it to the end. Actually, it might even still be on my computer minimized, so I think I left it minimized so that I could come back to it. But no, I wish I had more time. That's the thing. I would listen to more of them, but I feel like it's just so busy that it's hard. Whether it's trying to do social media, which again I said I'm terrible at because it's so hard. It'd be like, you got to do this. I'm like, I'm just trying to keep up with life.
Right.
But also consuming other content is hard too. Like people are like, what music do you listen to? I'm like, I don't really much because I win, So anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's just busy. So,
Well, again,
all right. I'll stop talking. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's very nice to talk to you.
You too. Thank
And,
you.
Yeah, you got big things coming. I can tell. You always do. You always got something going, and I'm happy you had me here. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm like super hyped for this conversation and your vulnerability, and I thought it was amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime.
AmandaValentineBites.com